You're going to need your Foundation Unit 13 workbook, probability, and you are going to turn to creating sample space diagrams. Now, a sample space diagram is just another way of organising your information so that you can work out probabilities. So looking at the first one, I spin these two spinners, then add the numbers together to get a score. Work out the probability that I get a score of 4. So I can see I've got 1, 3 and 5 and 1, 3 and 4. So I've got my first spinner here and my possible outcomes are 1, 3 and 5. And I've got my second spinner here and my possible outcomes are 1, 3 and 4. So these bits are my possible outcomes. Now it tells me that I add the numbers together. So a bit like filling in a times table grid, I'm going to do 1 add 1 is 2, 1 add 3 is 4, 1 add 5 is 6, and so on until my grid is filled in. It then asks me to work out the probability. So it says, work out the probability that I get a score of 4. So I look in my box and I've got a 4, 4. So my probability is 2 out of 9 because there are 2 4s and there are 9 things all together. Right, we're going to try the second one together. I spin these two spinners and add the numbers together to get a score. Work out the probability that I get a score of 4. So I've got 1, 3 and 5, 2, 3 and 4. So I'm going to make up my sample space diagram. And my first spinner, I can have 1, 3 and 5. And my second spinner, I could have 2, 3 or 4. And now I have to fill in my grid. It tells me I am adding. So I'm going to do 1 add 2 is 3, 5, 7, 4, 6, 8, 5, 7, 9. I want to work out the probability I get a score of 4. Well, there's one of them. So the probability of getting a 4 is 1 out of 9. Now pause the video and have a go at the third question yourself. So you should have got your outcomes from your first spinner. Your outcomes from your second spinner. And it tells you are going to times them. So I'm going to times them. And then it wants to know what is the probability I get a score of 4. I look at my grid, it's 1, 4, so the probability of a 4 is 1 out of 9. So now 3 questions to have a think about. How do you decide the headers, so the title rows of the rows and columns? Which property of the sample space diagram gives you the denominator of the probability? And what problems can we think of with a sample space diagram? Pause the video, have a think, then we'll fill it in. Right. So the headers are just the possible outcomes of the 2 events. It's just the possible outcomes of the 2 events. So the scores you could get on the spinner, the numbers you can get on a dice, the counters you could pick out of a bag. Which property of the sample space diagram gives you the denominator of the probability? So to get the denominator of the probability, I counted up how many scores were inside. So really it's the area of your sample space diagram, but it's the number of combined outcomes. And then problems we could think of with the sample space diagram. So the problems, well, on all these examples up here, my spinners were split equally. If they're not split equally, it doesn't work for a sample space diagram because this is assuming each outcome is equally likely. So unequal outcomes. And another problem is, what happens if I had a third spinner? You can't make a 3D one very easily. So more than 2 events. Okay, so you now need to ensure that your notes are complete. And then you're going to turn the page and you're going to try the questions on the next page. So check your answers, make sure you write down any corrections you need to, and make sure if you have done anything wrong, you know why you did it wrong. And as always, you can go and use the MathsWatch clip to practice some more.